Story 1. Back in 2017, I worked at a small, 36-room condo hotel on Marco Island, Florida. The property was owned by a small venture capitalist firm run by two wealthy siblings and one of their sons. I had been brought on board by a colleague who had been hired as the general manager. Since the firm had little knowledge or expertise in the hospitality industry, it was basically up to the general manager and me to make significant changes to the property. We wore multiple hats and performed several roles using our industry experience. There was only one other office employee, an older lady named Karen, who mostly handled billing for the unit owners and stayed out of the way whenever she could. My role was extensive. I handled the day-to-day front desk operations, phone support, concierge duties, assigned daily housekeeping tasks, managed the brief night audit, and, most importantly, I was responsible for the business revenue strategy. I managed online room inventory for our website and major online travel agencies like Expedia, Booking, and Trivago. 2017 turned out to be a record year for the property. My revenue strategy brought in tens of thousands of dollars more than previous years. But as we moved into the second and third quarters of the year, things started to go downhill. The general manager, my colleague, resigned due to personal reasons unrelated to his job performance, leaving just Karen and me to run the place. At that time, Karen had already planned a month-long trip to Italy, and she was determined to go no matter what. So, off she went. In the midst of Karen's departure, a severe hurricane named Irma was looming. For those unfamiliar, Irma made landfall in the U.S. as a Category 4 storm, which is extremely powerful. Hurricane Katrina, which devastated New Orleans in 2005, was also a Category 4. As you can imagine, everyone was on high alert and preparing to evacuate. During my evacuation, while not on the clock or being paid by the company, I received a call from the firm's accountant, asking me to walk her through how to remotely run the property management systems audit. For those unfamiliar with hotel systems, the day doesn't officially end until you tell the system to close it out and run the necessary reports. If no one runs the audit, the hotel essentially remains stuck on the previous day. So, while evacuating from a natural disaster, I spent about 2 hours on the phone walking her through the process. I was never compensated for this time. When Irma hit, it made landfall on Marco Island, and the entire surrounding area lost power for about a week. When we returned, we were greeted by significant damage, including parts of the top floor rooms having their walls and roofs blown away. Business was slow to return, and my hours were cut from 40 per week to around 16. I started to struggle financially and was forced to use all of my tow and vacation days just to keep my paychecks at a livable amount. I was 24 or 25 at the time, living alone, and the company offered no clear plan for getting me back to full-time compensation. I sent an email to the CEO, who I regularly spoke with in weekly revenue meetings, explaining my situation and asking if an advance would be possible to help me make ends meet. The response I received was a brief sentence along the lines of, "We'll be open again soon, thanks." Bold strategy, but not exactly helpful considering I was the only person running hotel operations at that point. Within a week, I secured an interview for a better-paying job closer to home, aced the interview, and kept it to myself. The CEO's brother, who is also the CFO, flew down to be on the property for the first day of reopening, as business was finally starting to return to normal. The day before reopening, I received a call from HR at the new company confirming my job offer and asking me to stop by later that day to finalize everything. I called the CFO and asked him to come down to the office because I needed to talk. When he arrived and asked what was going on, I told him I was resigning, effective immediately. His response was, "You realize that'll make it hard for us to open tomorrow, right?" I replied, "Nothing personal. Just like your company has financial concerns that prevent you from keeping your only employee here to run the hotel, I also have financial concerns that prevent me from staying here, as I have bills to pay. You'll be open again soon, don't worry." He gritted his teeth and said, "Okay then." I handed him my key to the property, got into my car, and never looked back. Story 2. Backstory. Around 2017, I worked as an environmental engineer with a specialization in water treatment systems. Although it wasn't my day job, a friend who worked for a neighboring city reached out to me for help investigating a waterfowl preservation area. There had been unusual die-off events among the birds, and the city suspected water pollution. I was contracted by the city to run tests and determine the source of the pollution, with permission to access various areas along the waterfowl preserve. Without going into too much detail about the testing process, it's complex and time-consuming. I started taking water and soil samples from areas surrounding the preserve. I soon discovered high levels of nitrates and phosphates in the water, which were affecting the birds. Now, I just needed to find the source of the contamination. I followed the river upstream, past several housing sites, apartments, and some settling ponds. After weeks of tests, I ruled out these locations as sources. However, the further upstream I went, the higher the pollution levels climbed so high, in fact, that the water became dangerous for human contact. The pollution levels were approaching the category of a Superfund site. This all happened last summer. As I continued along the river, I heard the sounds of children playing in the water. Alarm bells went off immediately. Turning a bend, I came upon a small dock with 4 or 5 kids jumping into the heavily polluted water, while a woman sat on the dock watching them. Concerned for the children's safety, I approached the woman and informed her that I was working with the city. Based on the pollution I had discovered, I told her that swimming in the river was banned. She wasn't happy and argued, but I mentioned I'd be calling the Marshal Code Enforcement to have the area closed off. She quickly gathered the kids and left. When the marshal arrived, he found the dock hadn't been built to code and condemned it, forcing the homeowners association responsible for it to demolish it within a week, or the city would do it and send them the bill. Despite this, the pollution problem remained unsolved. Here's where things got strange. As soon as I passed the HOA subdivision, the pollution completely disappeared. I ran 5 or 6 tests to confirm it, but the results were clear. The source of the pollution was within the HOA. Now I just needed to figure out what they were doing. With the marshal's help, I started asking the HOA residents some simple questions. Do you know if they fertilize the grass? When do they usually do this? Do you know what type of fertilizer they use? I was just gathering evidence, but soon enough, things escalated. Remember the woman from earlier? Turns out she was the president of the HOA. I only discovered this after she called the police on the marshal and me, reporting strange men walking around her neighborhood. She called the police 4 times in one day before they told her to stop or face charges. That didn't stop her from following us around in her car, taking pictures with her phone. Eventually, we spoke with an older gentleman who gave us the breakthrough we needed. The HOA president had been fining residents for not having perfectly green lawns, despite the ongoing drought. After some homeowners were fined by the city for watering their grass during water restrictions, she took matters into her own hands. She had initially tried hiring a landscaper to spray fertilizer, but due to EPA regulations, he refused. A few days later, some men showed up with a large farm trailer of liquid and sprayed every inch of the HOA-controlled grass, including right up to the water's edge. With the homeowner's permission, I took soil samples from around his property and the common area near the river and dock. After a week, the results came back, confirming the source of the pollution. The HOA president had arranged for farm-grade fertilizer to be sprayed on the lawns. This particular type of fertilizer is heavily regulated by the EPA and requires a special license to possess or use. I presented my findings to my contact at the city, explaining the severity of the environmental damage. I was legally obligated to report the HOA to the State Regulatory Board for gross violations. My contact thanked me for my work and informed me that if the case went to court, I would need to testify. Epilogue: the court case was originally scheduled for March 2020, but it never got that far. The HOA president entered a plea deal with the state, agreeing to pay for the environmental cleanup of the river and restitution to the state. The fines alone amounted to nearly $250,000, and the cleanup, which is still ongoing, is expected to cost over $1 million. The HOA president was removed from her position, and the HOA itself was facing potential dissolution by the state due to negligence and poor management. Although I'm not sure how she obtained the fertilizer, I suspect that some of the charges she faced were related to that. The saddest part of all, if the HOA had simply contacted the city or the state, they would have been given a list of approved fertilizers that wouldn't have polluted the water or caused an environmental disaster. The contact information is readily available on both the city's and state's websites, but the HOA didn't bother to check. Story 3. In July of 2002, when I was 16, our neighbor, who had a reputation for being difficult, decided she wanted to have satellite TV installed. The house she lived in had a tiny backyard and an even smaller front yard. The fence my mother had installed a few years prior was about 5 yards away from her side door. The only place the satellite dish could be installed was in the back of her house, but there was no way for the installation vehicles to access her backyard directly. So, in her brilliant plan, she decided to have them tear down our fence and drive across our property to get there. This, of course, sparked a massive argument between her and my mother. The neighbor tried to claim that the fence had been built too close to her house. In response, my mom produced the land survey that showed the fence was in the right spot. Turns out, both of them were slightly off. We had known her house was built very close to the property line, but it was even closer than we thought. Her house was only a few feet away from the line, meaning our fence should have been practically touching the side of her house. Her uncle happened to be the deputy mayor of our small town with a population of around 2,000, and she tried to get him involved. Nothing came of it, so we thought the issue was behind us. Fast forward to late September or early October of that same year. While I was at school, my mom was taking a shower when our 2 dogs alerted her to someone at the door. She quickly put on a bathrobe and answered to find the police chief and about a dozen officers standing on our lawn. They claimed they had been tipped off about a lab on our property and demanded to search the premises. My mom immediately suspected it was the neighbor behind this, as the police chief was known to be friendly with her family. Mom demanded to see a search warrant, which they didn't have. This led to hours of them refusing to leave until they were allowed to search. This all began around 9 or 10 in the morning. By the time it was nearing 3 p.m., Mom told them she needed to pick me up from school and take me to my grandmother's house since I couldn't drive yet. They refused to move their vehicles and insisted it was fine, they'd send a squad car to pick me up, which would have been incredibly embarrassing for me. Mom called her lawyer, who advised her that without a warrant, she had no obligation to let them search. At this point, the police chief became more aggressive. He warned that if he went to get a warrant, he would claim he could smell something on the property, which would allow him to get a warrant for anything he wanted. He then threatened that when he returned, he'd kick in our door, and if our dogs so much as looked at him, he'd shoot them on the spot. Yes, he really said that to my mom. Eventually, my grandma was able to pick me up from school nearly an hour after classes let out and, fearing for her safety, my mom allowed the police to search the house. They found my mom's gun safe, which was a sturdy, steel safe with a circular lock. The key was sitting on top of the safe, clearly visible. Despite this, the police used a crowbar to pry it open, even though the key was right there. They then took out the guns and started dividing them up. They even confiscated my mom's handgun, for which she had a legal concealed carry permit. This went on for hours, with my mom being forced to sit outside in nothing but a bathrobe. Finally, she relented and let them into my stepdad's workshop. He had been using the space to restore a motorcycle from a wreck 15 years earlier. Barely stepping inside, the officers immediately started shouting, "Lab!" They pointed to cleaning agents and bottles that were grouped together. That was it. No actual evidence, just some cleaning supplies and a few empty mason jars. They brought in floodlights and even more officers. By 1 a.m., yes, my mom had been outside for nearly 16 hours. They claimed to have found a marijuana plant behind our 6-foot-tall privacy fence that blocked the view from the street. When I found out, I was furious. I was a 16-year-old in a small town, and I knew that word would spread fast. The next day, Saturday, I was browsing the internet when a friend messaged me, asking why my mom was in jail. I was confused because my mom wasn't in jail. Friend, my mom said it's on the news right now. Your mom and stepdad are in jail for running the largest operation in town history. Mom immediately called the news station to ask why they ran that story without verifying it. They apologized, admitting they had been told by the local police to air it. They issued a public apology the next night. I refused to go to school that Monday. It's worth noting that I hadn't been at school since the previous Friday. On Tuesday, when my grandpa dropped me off, I noticed a drug-sniffing dog on campus. Since it was close to drug-free week, I didn't think much of it. Later, my business teacher told me she had seen the article in the local paper and thought it seemed staged. She offered to support me if anyone gave me trouble over it. I headed to my locker, noticing the police officer exiting the same hallway. When I reached my locker, I saw it standing wide open. Furious, I confronted the principal. Me, why was my locker searched? Principal, it wasn't. You must have left it open yesterday. Me, that's impossible. My friends have lockers right next to mine, and they would have shut it if I left it open. I haven't been here since Friday. Are you seriously telling me it's been wide open since then? I called my mom, and she pulled me out of school for the rest of the day. Ultimately, all charges against my mom were dropped because of the marijuana plant they supposedly found. The police chief claimed in his official report that the plant was 8 feet tall. When questioned, he confirmed this to the judge. The judge then pointed out that if the plant was truly 8 feet tall, standing behind a 6-foot-tall fence, the chief wouldn't have needed to demand permission to search the property in the first place. The case was dismissed. But the story didn't end there. For 10 years, my mom played the long game. She waited for the statute of limitations to expire, ensuring the police chief couldn't retaliate against her. Once the statute had run its course, she reached out to a town council member. In a small town like ours, you don't mess with the town council members. Everyone knows them, and they hold significant influence. This particular council member was the head of the council, and he also happened to be the grandfather of one of my coworkers. He liked me well enough and agreed to hear my mom's story. He told her that the last he had heard, there was nothing in the police evidence locker, meaning none of the guns they confiscated had been logged. When my mom explained that most of the guns were family heirlooms and belonged to me, he asked if she could prove it. Of course, my mom had detailed records, including descriptions, serial numbers, and even distinguishing marks. She's meticulous about keeping a paper trail. The council member promised she would get the guns back by Monday. As it turned out, the police chief had sold the guns to his friends, thinking he had gotten away with it. When the council member showed up at the station, he informed the chief that, since no charges had been successfully pressed, all confiscated property had to be returned. Miraculously, by Monday, all the guns were back in the evidence locker, though one was missing a scope. It later came to light that the police chief had sold the guns over the years, and he had to buy them all back, often paying more than twice what he had sold them for. One of his former friends had even removed the scope, which never turned up. The police chief was immediately fired and arrested for his actions. We got our guns back. Edit. For those wondering, my mom did consider taking legal action against the town for everything that happened, especially since we faced harassment afterward. However, her lawyer advised that we had already achieved a good outcome getting our property back and seeing the corrupt police chief arrested. There wasn't much else we could do. As for the troublesome neighbor, she never got her satellite TV installed, as far as I know. She eventually sold her house, and we bought the property. It had originally belonged to our family, but was sold by my great-uncle years earlier. We tore the house down. Story 4. This story happened about 6 years ago when I worked for a retail company I'll call No Op. There were several key players in this situation. Store Manager, Mo. Thieving Assistant Manager, J. Lead Assistant Manager best friends with Store Manager, Travis. Jay was notorious among the staff for stealing, and it was well known by the lower levels of management. Unfortunately, she was considered a golden girl by Mo and Travis. Despite suspicions, no one had any solid proof, and there wasn't much motivation to find evidence since pay deductions only occurred for thefts over a certain amount, which Jay never crossed. One of Jay's favorite items to steal was vouchers for discounts or free products. These vouchers were meant to be torn up and stored in the safe, but there was no formal tracking process, so she could reuse them at other stores without getting caught. On Halloween, I was assigned to work on Till 4, the only register without a camera. Mo came up to me to pay for her shopping using some gift vouchers she received from a store manager's meeting because our store was doing well. I served her, and no one else touched my register all day since I was the primary cashier for that shift. After we closed for the night, Jay took the registers to cash up, and I headed out for a night at the pub with friends, unaware of what was coming next. On my next shift, Mo called me into the office. She told me the vouchers she had used were missing from the safe, and that she knew they had been rung up on my till. Mo then accused me of stealing the vouchers and demanded I return them, promising not to press charges or put anything on my file if I complied. Of course, I didn't have them and told her as much, but she didn't believe me. I spent the next hour searching everywhere under Till 4, in the bins outside, and around the tills just in case I had accidentally misplaced them while handling cash. Then Jay arrived, overheard what was going on, and offered to help search. Within 30 seconds, she magically found the vouchers in a spot I had already checked. I was furious and seethed. What a coincidence that Jay finds them immediately where I already looked. It was clear to me that she was framing me for her own theft. She could have easily claimed she found them in the office, but instead, she made me the fall guy. I tried to plead my case to Mo and Travis, arguing that I would never be so foolish as to steal vouchers I knew belonged to Mo since I had served her myself. Another team leader, Paul, even backed me up, saying he was sure Jay was setting me up. But Mo and Travis wouldn't listen. Jay was their favorite, and they believed she had caught me in the act. This meant war. Over the next few months, I devised a plan. I started getting closer to Jay, flirting and pretending to admire her. I acted as though we were becoming good friends. It took a while, but eventually I gained her trust, and I knew this was my opportunity to catch her in the act. One day, we were wasting off some unsold Christmas chocolate products, which were supposed to be thrown out. Jay suggested we take them home instead, which was against company policy and considered stealing. We were standing just outside the camera's range, so I said, "I don't want any, but if you want them, go ahead." I placed the bag of chocolates on a trolley, strategically positioned within the camera's view. I had studied the camera angles in detail, anticipating a moment like this. Jay glanced at the camera, then at the trolley, and walked off to get her things. I discreetly warned my colleagues not to take any of the chocolate, even if offered, and couldn't help but grin as I watched her return, casually pick up the bag as if it were her shopping, offer some to others, and then walk out the door with it. Gotcha. The next morning, I went to work and approached Travis with a serious look on my face. I told him, "You should check the cameras on the back door at around 10:21 p.m. I think you'll find what you see very interesting." He asked me to explain, but I glanced over at Jay, who was standing nearby, and simply repeated, "I really think you should look at the footage." Travis begrudgingly went to review the camera footage, and within 10 minutes, Jay was called into the office. They searched her bag, and within the hour, she was suspended pending investigation. By the end of the week, she was fired and barred from the store. I later received a full apology from Mo and Travis. They explained that they genuinely believed I was the culprit and had no idea Jay could be a thief. Their jaws dropped when I told them that every staff member knew Jay had been stealing, but none of us felt we could do anything about it. After confirming this with other staff members, they apologized again. 6 months later, I was offered training to become a team leader. I accepted the offer, but ultimately left for a white-collar job at another company before completing my training. Story 5. I'm a college student trying to make ends meet while juggling classes and a part-time job at a local coffee shop. My name's not important, but what is important is that I'm always on the lookout for ways to earn some extra cash. You know how it is, textbooks don't buy themselves, and ramen gets old after a while. So, there I was, minding my own business during my shift at the coffee shop, when my coworker, Jess, comes up to me with this proposition. She's like, "Jess, hey, I've got a friend who needs a dog sitter for about a week. You interested?" Me, maybe. What's the deal? Jess, she's going out of town and needs someone to stay at her place to watch her dog. The dog's got anxiety issues, so it can't be left alone for long. Now, I'm not exactly a dog expert, but I've had pets before and I'm good with animals. Plus, the idea of making some extra money sounded pretty sweet, so I asked for more details. Me, how much is she offering? Jess, she didn't say. You'd have to talk to her about that. But hey, it's a nice house, and you'd get to stay there for free. Free lodging and some cash. Sounded good to me. So, I told Jess to give her friend my number. Later that day, I got a call from this woman, let's call her Karen, because, well, you'll see why. Karen, hi, this is Karen. Jess gave me your number about dog sitting. Me, yeah, that's right. I heard you need someone for about a week. Karen, 6 days, actually. Can you do it? Me, sure, I think I can manage that. What are you thinking for payment? Karen, oh, I don't know. What do you usually charge? Now, I'd never actually done this before, but I didn't want to seem inexperienced. So, I threw out a number that seemed fair. Me, how about $20 a day? Karen, that sounds reasonable. So, $120 for the 6 days. Me, yeah, that's right. Karen, great. I'll give you the details when you come over. So, we set up a time for me to come check out her place and meet the dog. When I got there, I realized this wasn't just a simple dog-sitting gig. The house was nice, sure, but it was also packed with plants inside and out, and Karen had a whole list of instructions for taking care of them. Karen, oh, and while you're here, you'll need to water all the plants. I've got a schedule written down for you. Me, okay. That wasn't mentioned before. Karen, it's not a big deal. You'll be here anyway, right? I should have spoken up then, but I didn't want to lose the job. So, I just nodded and listened as she went on about her dog's special needs, the feeding schedule, and a million other little things. Fast forward to day 3 of my stay. I'm juggling my online classes, taking care of this high-maintenance dog, and playing botanist to Karen's small jungle. It's not exactly the easy money I was hoping for, but hey, $120 is $120, right? Wrong. I'm in the middle of a Zoom lecture when my phone buzzes. It's a text from Karen. Karen, hi, hope everything's going well. Quick question, can you Venmo me $80 from what I gave you? I've been thinking about it, and I feel like I'm overcharging you. I had to read that message twice because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Overcharging me. For what? The privilege of being her unpaid gardener. I took a deep breath before replying. Me, I'm sorry, but I don't understand. We agreed on $20 per day for 6 days. That's $120 total. Karen, yes, but you're staying in my house. You don't have to commute, and my place is nicer than yours. I think $40 for the 6 days is more than fair. Now, I was starting to get angry. I'd been busting my butt taking care of her high-maintenance dog and her small garden, and she had the nerve to ask for money back? No way. Me, I'm sorry, but I can't do that. We had an agreement, and I'm doing more work than just dog sitting. I'm also taking care of all your plants, which wasn't part of the original deal. Karen, don't be ungrateful. I'm letting you stay in my house for free. You should be thanking me for the opportunity. Me, I brought my own food, and your house doesn't even have air conditioning. Plus, I'm doing extra work with the plants. The $20 per day is more than fair. Karen, fine. If that's how you want to be, I won't hire you again. Good luck finding another job that pays this well for so little work. Me, good luck finding a cheaper sitter who will also be your personal gardener. After that, I didn't hear from Karen again. I finished out the 6 days, took care of the dog and the plants, and left the house exactly as I'd found it. Part of me wanted to be petty, maybe forget to water a plant or two, but I'm not that kind of person. I did the job I was hired to do, and I did it well. When I got back to work, Jess asked me how the dog sitting went. I was tempted to spill everything, but I didn't want to cause drama at work, so I just shrugged and said it was fine. But here's where it gets interesting. A few weeks later, Jess comes up to me at work, looking uncomfortable. Jess, hey, I heard you had some issues with Karen. Me, oh, what did she say? Jess, she told me you were rude and ungrateful, and that you tried to overcharge her for dog sitting. I couldn't help but laugh. I pulled out my phone and showed Jess the text messages from Karen. Me, here's what really happened. Your friend tried to take back most of the money we agreed on, and then called me ungrateful when I refused. Jess's eyes widened as she read through the messages. Jess, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I had no idea she was like this. Me, it's not your fault. You didn't know. Jess, I can't believe she lied to me like that. I'm going to have a serious talk with her. I shrugged, not wanting to cause more drama. Me, do what you think is right. I just wanted you to know the truth. A few days later, Jess came back to me with an update. Jess, I talked to Karen. She tried to deny everything at first, but when I mentioned the text messages, she finally admitted what she did. She's really embarrassed and wants to apologize to you. Me, thanks, but I don't need an apology. I just want to put this whole thing behind me. Jess, I understand. And just so you know, I've told all our mutual friends about what happened. None of us will be asking her for favors or helping her out anymore. I have to admit, hearing that gave me a little satisfaction. Karen might have thought she could take advantage of me, but in the end, her entitlement cost her a lot more than $80. She lost the trust and respect of her friends, and probably any chance of finding a decent dog sitter in the future. Story 6. Over the past 12 months, I've had to undergo 3 separate tests. 2 were blood tests, about 4 months apart, and the third was a different type. What I didn't know was that each of these tests came with significant out-of-pocket costs, nearly $300 each time, which I wasn't informed of until I received the bill. Living in a high cost of living city due to my career, with student loan payments resuming and a few unexpected expenses, paying these bills was becoming a challenge. So I decided to apply for a financial assistance program through my insurance. Now, you'd think having such a program would be a relief, and I thought so too. I requested an application, filled it out, and mailed it back in June. Shortly after, I got a confirmation through my insurance's app, acknowledging they had received the application and instructing me to allow 21 business days for review. I thought, okay, I can wait. And wait I did, and waited some more. Finally, by mid-August, I figured it was time to check on the application status. After being transferred around in phone triage, I finally reached someone in customer service. Their response? We never received your proof of income, so we closed your application. What proof of income? I asked, confused. We sent a letter requesting it, but since we never got a response, we closed the application. Mind you, this request for proof of income wasn't mentioned in the initial application form, nor had I ever received any letter, email, call, or even a smoke signal from them asking for it. I never got this letter, I said. Well, we sent it out in July. Okay, but I never received it. Can you resend it and email it to me this time? I'll send the proof of income as soon as I get it. The representative agreed, and I thought that would be the end of it. They'd send the letter, I'd email my pay stubs, and it'd be over. But no. Guess what email never arrived? I checked and rechecked, refreshing my inbox and junk folder constantly, but nothing. So, a few days later, I called again. They once again claimed they sent the email, but I hadn't received it. It took 3 more calls to finally get someone to send the email while I was on the phone with them. Finally, I got the email, attached my pay stubs, and sent it back. Surely, I was done now, right? Wrong. Within a week, I received the paper letter requesting the information followed. 1 day later, by another letter saying that since I hadn't sent them my pay stubs, they were closing my application again. At this point, I was beyond frustrated. During all this time, I was still trying to pay off my medical bills, and I had to undergo a 3rd test, increasing the bill even more. I was told this test would be covered by my insurance, but clearly, that was not true. So, I called again, this time to file a formal complaint and ask what was going on. They claimed once more that they never received my pay stubs and that I would need to reapply. One representative even told me, "I don't know what you're asking me to do," after I had clearly explained why I was upset. At this point, I realized I had no choice but to reapply. Fine. But this time, I was determined to make sure there was absolutely no way they could claim they didn't receive my application. I printed off a month's worth of pay stubs, 10 copies each. I wasn't going to forget those. I also printed 10 applications and filled them all out, including recalculating how much I had paid out of pocket for medical expenses over the past 12 months. I made sure to include that 3rd test and even the copay from refilling my prescription. By the time I finished, the amount was more than $200 higher than it had been on my original application. Now to make sure they got it. That following Monday, I went to the post office, asked for 10 stamps, and sent the first application via certified mail. It cost me less than $12 to ensure my compliance. Every day that week, I mailed out an application, each one numbered on the envelope with the same information, the same signatures, and the same dates. The only difference was the number on the envelope and the fact that the first one was sent via certified mail. Another week passed, and I hadn't heard from my insurance. So, I sent another certified letter, 5 more envelopes, and the same application once again. Finally, today, I received an email response. "Thank you for your application. Please allow us 30 days to review your request." It sounded suspiciously like the same message I had received the first time. But this time, I wasn't taking any chances. I continued sending the applications until they finally approved my request for financial assistance, something that should have happened back in July.